Rookies, rookies, rookies. Along with Lewis going to Ferrari, this has undoubtedly been the biggest story going into 2025, given the unprecedented number of young drivers that are going to be making their full season debuts. It's definitely going to make the season a lot more unpredictable, because there is going to be drivers who no doubt will surprise us in a positive way, and there is also going to be drivers who are going to disappoint relative to expectations. I have been meaning to do a video like this for a while now, talking about all of the young drivers, and so this is the perfect time to go through each and every one of them and talk about which rookies, in my opinion, are going to be under the most pressure in 2025, starting from the least and working my way up. So let's get straight into it. First up, let's talk about Gabriel Bortoleto. And now, right off the bat, he has got a multi-year deal with Sauber/Audi, and compared to most of the other rookies who only have a contract for 2025, it just gives him, officially at least, a little bit more security and a little bit more stability, knowing that he does have a deal in place already for next season. And now, considering that this driver is a back-to-back Formula 3 and Formula 2 champion in the same vein as George Russell, Charles Leclerc and Oscar Piastri, I think that relatively speaking, he is definitely coming to Formula 1 a little bit under the radar. Most of the attention, I think, has been on the other rookies, the likes of Ollie Bearman, who obviously had this amazing debut last year in the Ferrari, and of course Kimi Antonelli, who's going to be making his Mercedes debut at just 18 years old. I think all of this has actually been quite good for Gabby, because it just takes a little bit more scrutiny and a little bit more pressure and attention away from him, which, to be honest, for a rookie can only be a good thing. Sauber as a team don't tend to also make a lot of driver swaps, to be honest. I think they're going to be more inclined to stay with Gabby and also Nico Hülkenberg for that stability for next season. And when it comes to Nico Hülkenberg, even though he is a very, very solid teammate and had a fantastic season last year, we also saw when Ollie Bearman was in the same car as him in Baku, Nico Hülkenberg is not unbeatable. I think Nico is going to be a very good benchmark for Gabby, both on track, being one of the better drivers in the midfield, and also off track. And Nico went from being out of Formula 1 to coming back and kind of reinstating his name to getting this big money move for the next few years to Audi. He is very comfortable with where he is in the back end of his career, and as a character, he's one of the least combustible drivers on the grid. Whenever he's had teammates, there has always been a good dynamic, there's never been any toxicity, and I think he is going to help Gabby kind of get the best out of himself for the better of the team. In terms of the Audi side to all of this, given that all of the emphasis is going to be on next year when the team officially becomes Audi, I think that they're going to turn off the development taps pretty early into 2025. There's going to be clearly less expectations and less pressure to perform this season, because I don't think they're going to have the equipment to do it, and I think Sauber are going to know that they're not going to have the car to do it, and so again, I think that's going to take even more pressure off Gabby's shoulders, and so I think he's going to be pretty safe in terms of 2025. The next driver on my list is Ollie Bearman. Now, just like Gabby, Ollie also has a multi-year deal, so already a little bit of security for 2026. We also know that Ayumu Komatsu, the team principal, is a massive fan of Ollie Bearman ever since he made his FP1 outing, his first FP1 outing for Haas in Mexico in 2023. He has had a really keen eye on Ollie Bearman, and I think what he did last year, scoring points on his debut at Ferrari, scoring points in his second race for Haas in Baku, those back-to-back points finishes, him becoming the first ever driver to score back-to-back points in his first two races for two different teams as well. That's a bit of an interesting statistic. All of these things I think make Ayumu massively excited about how good Ollie can be in 2025, and so I don't really see as there being a huge amount of pressure on Bearman. I think the biggest thing that will put him under pressure, and why I've put him ahead of Gabriel Bortoleto, is those expectations after what we saw last year. Ollie already basically established himself as at least a very good midfield driver. He looked incredibly competent in that Ferrari on his debut, and then more than competitive up against Hülkenberg in that Haas as well. The only thing that I think perhaps could catch him out is Esteban Ocon. Now, of course, Ocon is also new to Haas in 2025, so it creates a bit of an interesting dynamic where you've got two brand new drivers, one obviously a lot more experienced than the other. And with Ocon does come the potential for a little bit of inter-team friction. How Haas managed this Ocon and Bearman partnership is going to be key, because let's be honest, there is the potential that this could maybe spiral out of control a little bit if Bearman is perhaps a little bit too fast, and if it gets a little bit too spicy on track, and if potentially Esteban Ocon feels maybe even a little bit threatened that Ollie is maybe too fast too soon within his team. that could cause a few fireworks. So for all of those reasons, there's obviously the potential for Ollie to go to Ferrari in 27 or 28, depending on when Lewis leaves. So there's also that to kind of look for in the future. I think Haas are going to want to keep Ollie for as long as they can, because I think Ayuki Komatsu has absolute belief that Ollie Bearman is a future superstar, maybe even potential champion. So all of these things are playing in his favor, but I do think the wild card of having Esteban Ocon as his teammate, it opens the door for, let's say, a little bit of a fractious relationship. Isaac Hadjar is the next driver on my list. He comes into the season with just a 1-year contract, but to be honest, the reason why I think he's going to be under massive pressure, and certainly more than Bortoleto and Bearman, is that I just don't think that either Helmut Marko or Christian Horner actually have 100% faith in him. Let's not forget that last year, they contemplated signing Colapinto for that seat, but after his crashes in the late half of the season, it definitely seemed like their interest cooled. Isaac Hadjar is a talented driver, there's no doubt about that. He has been a race winner in almost every single series that he's raced in, but he just has never seemed like a championship caliber driver at any point. Last season, he finished second in the championship in F2, only behind Bortoleto, and he actually led the championship for the majority of the season. However, he has never stood out in any of his free practice sessions for either Red Bull or RB, and I think the biggest pressure that comes along with him is the fact that I think that he's got more to prove than anyone else. The thing that's definitely going to be playing in Hadjar's favor is actually his teammates. Now, Yuki is going to be a very tough benchmark, there's no doubt about it. He has improved year on year, he's going to be looking for his next career move. I actually talked about that in my previous video, but it is almost certain that Yuki is going to leave RB and the Red Bull family at the end of this season. And now, the Red Bull sister team is no stranger to having an all-new driver lineup, and sometimes even having 2 new rookies as part of their driver lineup, like we saw with Sainz and Verstappen in 2015. But going into a brand new regulation period in 2026, I just don't see them going with 2 new drivers unless Isaac Hadjar turns out to be an absolute disaster. Someone who just cannot stand the pressure, someone who can't score points, and maybe even becomes crash prone. At the moment, Red Bull in Formula 2 will have 3 junior drivers in Arvid Lindblad, Pepe Marti, and Oliver Goethe. Now, Arvid Lindblad is the hot prospect that is almost certain, barring that he has a good Formula 2 season this year, to basically step into Yuki Tsunoda's seat in 2026. However, as we saw when Bearman made his Formula 1 debut last year, and even when Colapinto and Lawson came in late on in the year under pretty difficult circumstances and did a very good job to establish their names in Formula 1, sometimes young drivers can spring a surprise. If Pepe Marti and Oliver Goethe have outstanding seasons in Formula 2, and if that coincides with Hadjar really struggling in Formula 1, then there is definitely the potential for Red Bull to have an all-new lineup in 26 and for Hadjar to be replaced. And next up, I have got Kimi Antonelli. And now, he is by far the most hyped driver on the grid for 2025. We've been hearing about this guy for a few years now, so I think I speak for everyone when I say that I cannot wait to see how he's going to perform. He obviously has the potential, and Mercedes think that he has the potential to be a future Formula 1 world champion. And the fact that he's making his debut at 18 years old for Mercedes, a race-winning and even championship-winning team not too long ago, the levels of pressure, the levels of scrutiny from the media and fans, and the expectations from the team itself to fight for wins and podiums, you just can't compare what Antonelli is going to go up against to, say, racing in the midfield for an RB or Haas. And now, given everything I've just talked about, a lot of people might be wondering why Antonelli is not higher or maybe even first on this list. Now, he does have a 1-year contract, so for sure his future is not certain beyond 2025, but it just feels like with everything that Mercedes have invested into Antonelli, all of the old car testing that they've done, everything that they've spent on his junior career, and just even the emotional investment that it feels like Toto Wolff has in him, given that he definitely feels like Kimi Antonelli is their Max Verstappen that, let's not forget, they originally missed out on in 2014. I just think that Toto, even if things go wrong, will have a sense of pride and also a bit of ego to make it work. I think that he will give Antonelli more chances to make mistakes than all of the other rookies because of that emotional investment that Toto has in him. There is no doubt that he is going to have rough points throughout the season. I mean, again, this is a driver who is 18 years old, and even in terms of racing, he isn't experienced outside of Formula 1. I think if he gets a few early podiums or top 5 finishes, if the car is about as competitive as it was last year, that is going to do a lot to ease the pressure off his shoulders. And now, even though George is now the de facto team leader, and he is going to be expected to comfortably beat Antonelli in his rookie season, as I mentioned previously, Antonelli only has a 1-year contract, but that is also true for George Russell. And now we know that there is basically only one driver that can replace George at Mercedes, and that is Max Verstappen. Toto made it very clear last year that he is going to be chasing Max very hard during 2025 for 2026, and in that imaginary scenario where Max decides that he wants to go to Mercedes for next season, I think that it's almost certain that you can't pair George Russell and Max Verstappen together after the toxicity that we saw last year, and so if that scenario does arise, I think George is way more likely to be the one that is told by Toto Wolff to move over than Antonelli, which again just relieves a little bit more pressure off his shoulders. And next up, I have got Liam Lawson. And now, the addition of Lawson on this list I think might be perhaps a little bit controversial to some people, because I think a lot of people are not going to consider him a rookie. He has already done 11 races across 2 different seasons, which is a very strange start to a Formula 1 career. However, the reason why I wanted to include him in this list is basically because of his specific circumstances. He is going into his first ever full preseason with a brand new team, and more than anything else, not only is he racing for a race-winning team, which again comes with a huge amount of pressure, but he is now the least experienced driver in the history of Red Bull racing. I think it's really easy to underestimate the level of pressure that Lawson is going to be under. Similar to Antonelli, he only has that 1-year contract for 2025, but we know that at Red Bull compared to Mercedes, forget about potentially being there for 26, he might not even be there for the end of 25. It's just a very, very different environment under Marko and Horner compared to someone like Toto Wolff. So despite the offset in experience, with Lawson obviously being a lot more experienced than Kimi Antonelli, Lawson is immediately going into a much more chaotic, much more toxic, and a much more unsettled environment, especially off the back of last year. There is also the question of Max Verstappen. And now, Max has already built up a bit of a reputation as a career killer, and regardless of how competitive that Red Bull will be, Max is going to make it into a podium, race-winning, and maybe even title-challenging car. That in itself is going to bring with it a lot of expectations for Liam to at least back Max up and be able to score podiums. Ultimately, that's what Checo wasn't capable of doing at the end of last year, and that is why the team lost out in the Constructors' Championship. It's going to be interesting to see exactly how harshly Red Bull are going to judge Lawson's performances, given his inexperience. However, the one thing that I do think might help him is that there isn't exactly that many great options for Red Bull for 26. Apart from Yuki Tsunoda, who's kind of the natural replacement if they do decide to replace Lawson, given that all of the top drivers have locked in their contracts for 26 and even 27, outside of Lawson and Tsunoda, there really isn't anyone else for Red Bull to replace him with. The last driver on my list is Jack Doohan, the rookie who in my opinion is undoubtedly the driver under the most pressure in 2025. And now Jack finds himself in very unique circumstances and also in a very, very tricky environment. In terms of hype, there is no doubt that he is nowhere near as hyped as the likes of Antonelli or even Ollie Bearman, but it's his environment and those really strange circumstances that absolutely puts a massive amount of pressure on his shoulders, and more than anyone else. Now, there is an alleged 6-race deal that Alpine have with Doohan, where after those 6 races, they can choose to cut him for nothing. Now, as if that wasn't bad enough for a driver who is not very experienced, they also signed Franco Colapinto from Williams on a reported 5-year contract, paying approximately $10 million to get him to Alpine. On top of that, Franco Colapinto has also got a slew of South American sponsors coming with him, so those financial factors alone weigh heavily in Jack being dropped at some point over the course of this season. And the fact is, you do not pay millions of pounds to buy out a driver's contract just to leave them on the sidelines. To be honest, I actually feel really sorry for Jack Doohan, because this is the very definition of being set up for failure. Even though he made his Grand Prix debut last year and so already has 1 race under his belt, and even though he's been with Alpine since 2022 and so he has quite a fair amount of experience in Alpine machinery, he is still essentially a rookie for 2025, and having his replacement ready on the sidelines, not having trust in him, not having the right environment around him, and all of the messages that these sort of things send in his mind. To me, this is just really endemic of the team that Alpine is, and also the way Flavio Briatore runs his teams. Alpine is a very highly volatile team, as demonstrated by the fact that they have had 5 team principals over the past 5 years, and clearly it is no different with their drivers. They are putting an inexperienced driver, a driver who's gonna make mistakes in the same way that Antonelli will probably make mistakes and Lawson will make mistakes, but whereas those drivers are gonna have races to make up for them, the moment that Jack Doohan makes a mistake in the first 6 races, his career is probably gonna be over. That is unrealistic expectations, that is unfair on a rookie, and it is not how you should run a team. Well, there you have it. If you did enjoy this video, then don't forget to subscribe, that would be massively appreciated, and I'll see you in the next one.